Sylvia Emberwyn Hale's bare feet slip on the polished obsidian as the guards drag her into the throne room, silver chains biting into the thin skin of her wrists. The air is heavy with dominance and smoke, the scent of 100 warriors pressed to the walls, watching the Omega offering brought before their king. Torches gutter against black stone carved with wolves and crowns, every flicker of light catching on the jagged onyx steps that lead up to him. Rydian Voss Nightfall, Alpha King. He sits like a carved statue of war, broad shoulders draped in dark leather, scars peeking where his shirt gapes at the collar, eyes a predator's amber that glows faintly in the dim. His wolf thrums in the air, pressing on her lungs until she wants to drop to her knees. When Thorn Ironcrest announces her as the Hale Payment, Rydian studies her with a cold, measuring gaze, as if she is a problem to solve, not a girl about to lose her life. Fear sears her spine, but something hotter, anger, pride, something wild burns through it. When the guards shove her forward and bow, Sylvia does the most reckless thing a powerless Omega can do in the Alpha King's hall. She lifts her chin, meets his eyes, and refuses to kneel. Instead of snapping her neck, he rises from the throne and makes her an offer no Alpha King should ever make to a debtor's Omega. 3 nights. His bed, his protection, his rules. After that, she walks free. He promises he will not mark her without consent. She doesn't believe him, but the chains on her wrists and the hunger in his gaze make one thing brutally clear. Sylvia has no choice but to step into the wolf's den and pray she walks out alive. Sylvia's chains rattled against the obsidian floor as the guards shoved her forward, the echo swallowed by the throne room's vast shadows. Rydian Voss Nightfall leaned back on his throne, a monolith of black stone carved with snarling wolves, his amber eyes pinning her like prey already sighted. The air thrummed with his alpha dominance, thick and suffocating, pressing on her Omega instincts until her knees buckled. But she locked them, chin lifting in defiance as Thorn Ironcrest stepped forward, his steel-gray gaze cold as forged blades. "The Hale blood debt," Thorn announced, voice like grinding gravel. Sylvia Emberwyn Hale, presented as equal value per the contract signed under the last full moon. Her family's lands, their lives, forfeit unless the king deems this sufficient. Rydian's lips curved, not quite a smile, more a predator's baring of teeth. He rose, unfolding to his full height, broad shoulders straining against dark leather etched with silver runes. Scars traced his forearms, visible where sleeves rode up, and the faint glow of his wolf flickered in his irises. "Speak the terms of the contract, Beta." Thorn unrolled a parchment, its edges singed from blood magic. The Hale Pack borrowed against the Nightfall crown to cover debts to rogue traders. In default, the Alpha King claims what he deems equal gold, land, or flesh. The Omegas were offered first. Sylvia's stomach twisted. Her father's drunken signature, her mother's whispered pleas, it crashed over her now. Not just land, her, sold to settle a fool's gamble. Rage boiled through the fear, hot and defiant. "You can't own me," she snarled, voice steady despite the tremor in her chains. "I'm no one's equal value." Rydian's gaze sharpened, amusement flickering like distant lightning. He descended the steps with liquid grace, circling her slowly, his scent smoke, pine, raw power flooding her senses until her pulse thundered. Up close, he was devastating, jaw carved from stone, midnight hair falling wild over a high brow, the pulse of ancient magic in his veins. "The contract says otherwise, little Omega, but I am not without mercy." He stopped before her, towering, heat radiating like a forge. 3 nights. Bound to my private wing. You eat at my table, sleep in my chambers, obey my guards. In return, I burn the parchment. Your family's lands stay theirs. No exile, no slaughter. And on the dawn of the 4th day, his voice dropped, velvet over steel. You walk free, unmarked, unclaimed, her breath caught. It was madness, a king's bargain with a debtor's Omega. And if I refuse? His laugh was low, dark. Then the contract stands. Your pack becomes chattel, starting with you in the breeding pens. His eyes raked her, not lecherous but assessing, as if measuring a weapon's edge. 3 nights, Sylvia. Nothing more unless you beg it. She swallowed the urge to bare her throat, instincts warring with fury. No choice. Not really. Fine. But touch me without consent, and I'll claw your eyes out. One scarred brow arched. Noted. He nodded to Thorn, who sliced the chains with a silver dagger. Minho escort her. A silent guard appeared. leading her through labyrinthine halls lit by eternal blue flames. Doors of ironwood groaned open to the king's private wing, a fortress within a fortress. Towering arches, fur-draped chambers, walls hung with tapestries of ancient battles. Her suite dwarfed her old pack hovel, a massive bed piled with silks, a hearth roaring without fuel, floor-to-ceiling windows barred with enchanted silver overlooking jagged peaks under a storm-lashed sky. Minho gestured to the wardrobe. Inside, gowns of midnight velvet hugging her curves perfectly, cloaks scented with protective herbs, collars of soft leather embedded with moonstones that could suppress an Omega's heat. Lingerie whispered in lace and shadow, sized to her exactly. Too exact. As if he'd measured her soul before she arrived. The door clicked shut, leaving her alone. Sylvia's hands shook as she touched a gown, rage and violation churning, studied, catalogued, caged in luxury. She paced to the barred window, staring at the wild moors where freedom mocked her. 3 nights with the Alpha King. Share his roof, his air, maybe his bed. But she was no prey. No trembling offering. If she must walk into the wolf's jaws, she'd do it with teeth bared. Negotiator, not sacrifice. She'd survive his bargain and make him regret underestimating an Omega, with nothing left to lose. The hall felt like a mouth waiting to close around her. Firelight licked up the stone columns, throwing long shadows across the vaulted ceiling, the glow catching on blades mounted along the walls, and the pale faces of the warriors stationed around the room. Sylvia's soft boots barely made a sound on the dark flagstones as the guard led her in, but every head turned anyway. Wolves knew when prey entered a room. Only, she reminded herself, she wasn't prey, not tonight. At the far end of the long table, beneath a banner of a silver wolf on black, Rydian sat in a high-backed chair carved from obsidian and bone, one elbow resting loose on the armrest, fingers idly tracing the rim of his goblet. His eyes tracked her approach, gold catching the firelight, unblinking. Thorn stood at his right shoulder, statue still, while Lysandra lounged to his left, draped in deep wine silk, lips curving with interest that didn't look friendly at all. "Sit," the king said, voice carrying easily through the hall. The chair beside him, of course, not down the table, not near the door, right in the heart of the lion's den or the wolf's. Sylvia crossed the remaining distance, every muscle tight with awareness of eyes, sense, judgment. The gown they'd left for her moved like water around her legs, midnight fabric catching hints of blue when she passed the torches. She took the seat, spine stiff, hands flat on the polished wood to keep them from shaking. "Back straight," Rydian murmured, barely moving his lips. "Shoulders down. You look like you're about to bolt." "Maybe I am," she muttered, keeping her eyes on the empty plate. A warm weight settled between her shoulder blades, light but inescapable his palm. His fingers spread, thumb grazing the line of her spine. Power shivered through the contact, his wolf pressing against her nerves, testing, tasting. Sylvia bit down on a gasp and forced herself not to flinch. "If you intend to survive this court," he said quietly enough that only she could hear, "you do not show fear. Not to me, not to anyone. Easy for you to say," she whispered back. "No one's talking about putting you in a pen if you misstep." His hand drifted up, slow as a stroke of fire, closing lightly around the side of her throat, not squeezing, just anchoring. The room sharpened, every breath too loud in her ears. He leaned in, his mouth near her ear, the heat of him a brand. "Also," he said, "your scent is broadcasting every thought you try to swallow. The moment those doors opened, every wolf in this hall knew you were terrified and angry and stubborn." There was something like dark amusement in his tone. "They will use that." "Can't help it," she snapped under her breath. "Omega, remember?" "Yes," he said, thumb brushing just under her jaw, startling a shiver out of her. "I do." Her pulse tripped against his fingers. He seemed to feel it because something in his eyes flickered, that faint, dangerous glow intensifying before he forced it back. When he spoke again, his voice had a new roughness to it. "Breathe in," he ordered. "Hold. Now push it down. Imagine a door. Close it on the fear first. Lock it. Then the anger. Then the urge to run." His grip stayed steady, not hurting, just there, insistently real. "Leave only what you want them to smell." "And what's that?" she managed. He considered her for a beat. "Steel." She almost laughed. "Wrong, Omega, Your Majesty." "Try," he said. So she did. Inhale, hold, picture a door. She imagined her father's shaking hands signing away their debt. Slam. Her mother's tired eyes, slam. The humiliation of being dragged through the fortress, displayed like a thing, slam. Underneath, there was something harder, sharper, a glint of fury, an ember of stubbornness that refused to die. She focused on that. The ember grew, molten and bright. Her jaw eased. Her shoulders lowered, not in surrender but in readiness. Rydian's eyes darkened, head tilting slightly. Better, he said. His hand slipped from her throat slowly, fingertips trailing along her jaw as they left, leaving sparks in their wake. Again later. You'll need the practice. Platters began to arrive then, carried by silent servants. Roasted venison, root vegetables slick with herbs, fresh bread, meat pies that made her stomach cramp with longing. The last meal she'd eaten had been stale oats and desperation. Eat, Rydian said, reaching for his own goblet. She hesitated. What, no royal taster? Not worried someone's poisoned the troublesome Omega? His mouth curved. I'd know. He paused. And you're more valuable alive. Comforting, she muttered, but she picked up the knife anyway. They ate in a strange, taut silence. Conversation murmured down the table between generals and lesser nobles, but around the king was a bubble of wary quiet. Even Lysandra watched, eyes bright, as if waiting for a show. You worked yourself to the bone, Rydian said at last, as if continuing a conversation they hadn't started. In your old pack. She stiffened. That a guess? A debt that size doesn't appear out of nowhere, he said, slicing his meat with surgical precision. Someone was bleeding your family long before they came to me. Omegas are the first ones squeezed. Her knife scraped a little too hard against the plate. We did what we had to, she said. Cooking, cleaning, tending pups that weren't ours, running errands from dawn until our legs shook. Heat cycles managed with herbs we couldn't afford so we'd stay useful. Her throat tightened, the words tasting like old smoke. Sometimes I thought if I made myself indispensable enough, they'd stop looking at me like a number on a ledger. And did they? His voice was even, but there was a tightness around his eyes. No, she said softly. They just wrote a bigger number. The king's jaw clenched. His goblet hit the table harder than necessary, wine sloshing. Down the hall, conversations stuttered, then resumed. You dreamed of leaving, he said after a moment, not looking at her. Human cities. She blinked. What? You read minds now too? You reek of longing when you talk about outside these walls, he said. It's not just freedom, it's distance. Anonymous crowds. No one sniffing your scent the moment you walk into a room. Sylvia stared at her hands. I used to read old smuggled magazines, she admitted reluctantly. Pictures of humans in their ridiculous clothes, some of them eating in the street, carrying little paper cups of coffee. No pack hierarchy, no scent lines, just chaos. I wanted that, to be no one. Her mouth twisted. Hard to be sold if no one knows your name. A beat of silence. She felt his gaze on her, heavy, assessing. Being no one, he said quietly, isn't the freedom you think. She almost snapped back, but something in his tone stopped her. When she risked a glance, his eyes weren't on her anymore. They drifted past the hall, past the walls, somewhere years and miles away. How old were you? She asked before she could stop herself. When you took the throne. He took a slow breath, setting his knife down with care. The hall seemed to lean in. 22 winters, he said. Old enough to know better. Young enough to still think knowing better mattered. He didn't wait for her response, as if this story had been waiting at the back of his throat and now had to come out. My father wouldn't yield. His mind had been gone for years, eaten by paranoia and bloodlust. He saw enemies in every shadow. Sometimes he was right. The ghost of a humorless smile. Mostly he wasn't. Sylvia watched his hands. They were steady, but the tendons stood out white along his knuckles. He called a challenge night, Rydian said. Accused half the betas of treason. Said he'd gut anyone who spoke against him. I told him he was unfit to rule. His eyes flicked to hers, a flash of something raw. He laughed, called me pup, so I stepped into the circle. Her breath caught. You challenged your own father. He left me no choice, Rydian said. I thought I could restrain myself. Win, not kill. Prove I was strong enough to lead without becoming what he was. His gaze dropped to the table. I was wrong. The fire crackled, loud in the quiet. He taunted me, Rydian went on. Said Omegas were good for breeding and bleeding. Said my mother died because she was weak. My wolf, snapped. He flexed his fingers slowly, as if remembering the feel of blood. When I came back to myself, the circle was empty. He was in pieces. And half the court was on their knees. Not in respect, but in terror. Sylvia's chest ached. She saw it then, the moment his wolf had taken everything from him and given him the world in exchange. A crown made of bone and regret. "You think being no one would save you," he said softly. "But being the one everyone sees, and no one truly knows? That's its own cage." She swallowed. For a heartbeat, the distance between Debtor's Omega and Alpha King shrank to something fragile and thin. Two people who had never been given a real choice, bleeding under different weights. "Still," she said, because if she didn't deflect, she might drown in it. "Humans have coffee, and shoes that don't belong to 10 other people first." The corner of his mouth twitched. "You'd hate the noise." "Maybe," she admitted, "but it'd be my choice to hate it." His gaze settled fully on her again, sharp and searching, as if he were trying to see the version of her that might have existed in another life. "Choice," he repeated, tasting the word. 3 nights, Sylvia. That's what I can give you. After that," his jaw tightened, "we'll see what either of us is still capable of choosing." Her heart stuttered. The firelight painted his scars in gold, his eyes molten and unreadable. Across the table, Lysandra watched them like a cat watching a fuse burn down. Thorne's expression didn't change, but his grip on his goblet was iron-hard. Sylvia lifted her chin, forcing her shoulders down, her scent locked behind the door he'd made her imagine. "Then I'll make damn sure those 3 nights are mine," she said, "even if I spend every one of them arguing with you." This time, the curve of his mouth was almost a real smile. "I would expect nothing less from the Omega who refused to kneel. Sleep refused to come." Sylvia lay on her back in the too-soft bed, staring up at the carved beams overhead as if the snarling wolves etched into the wood might lunge down and swallow her. The fire in the hearth had burned low, embers pulsing like a heartbeat in the dark, but her own pulse was faster, uneven, skipping every time memory replayed the way the hall had gone quiet when she refused to kneel, the way Rydian's hand had tightened on her throat, not cruel, just there, as if his touch alone could pin the world in place. Eventually, the walls felt too close. She slipped from the bed, bare feet sinking into a fur rug, and wrapped one of the lighter cloaks around her shoulders. The garments they'd left for her had no weight of memory, yet no smell of smoke from her old hearth, no traces of her mother's herbal soap. Just nightfall stone and faint wolf musk, unfamiliar and unsettling. The balcony doors gave under a tentative push, wards humming faintly along the frame. Cool night air rushed in, sharp with pine and distant snow, brushing over her skin like a blessing. She stepped out, fingers catching briefly on the cold iron railing. Below, the training ground sprawled in silver and shadow. Moonlight washed over the packed earth, the dummies and weapon racks, the painted lines of the sparring circle. Empty now, but the ground remembered every howl, every clash of teeth and steel. Beyond the walls, the forest rose dark and endless, a black sea under a sky pricked with stars. Sylvia breathed in deep, letting the chill burn her lungs. Out here, the scent of stone and smoke was thinner. She could almost imagine herself somewhere else on a human rooftop, maybe, watching streetlights flicker instead of torches. No ranks, no alpha aura pressing on her bones. A low sound rolled through the night, distant but too close all the same. A howl, rough and raw, cutting across the quiet. It wasn't the clean, bright call of a content pack. This sound was jagged around the edges, frayed with struggle and teeth-gritted control. Her skin prickled. Every hair on her arms stood on end. Another howl answered, shorter, more like a barked command. Then silence. "Can't sleep?" She spun, cloak whipping around her legs. Rydian stood just inside the balcony doors, half in shadow. The only thing he wore was a pair of loose black pants hanging low on his hips, the rest of him bare to the cold and the moon. In the softer light, without leather and metal, he looked more dangerous, not less. Scars mapped his chest and arms in pale strokes, old claw marks across his ribs, a ragged crescent near his shoulder, a thin white line over his heart like someone had once tried to carve it out. His hair was a mess, damp at the temples, as if he'd shifted and back again too fast. Faint traces of fur clung to his forearms. His eyes still held the last ghost of that wolfish glow. Sylvia swallowed. "Do you make a habit of sneaking into women's rooms half-dressed, or am I special?" "1," he said, voice a little rougher than usual. "This is my wing. 2, you left your balcony wards weak enough a pup could slip past them. And 3. He stepped out into the moonlight with her, breath fogging the air between them. You're not just any woman, are you? She snorted. I'm a debtor's omega in a borrowed dress. You're a debtor's omega who stands on a nightfall balcony instead of curled under a bed, he countered. You're either very brave or very foolish, or very tired of being afraid, she said quietly, turning back to the view. For a while, they just stood there. The night pressed close but not suffocating, cool air threading between them. His presence was a weight at her side, heavy but strangely anchoring. She could feel his heat without touching him, like standing too near a bonfire. Tell me, he said at last, what took them from you first? Sleep, hope, or trust? She huffed out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. Straight to ghost stories, huh? It's past midnight in a cursed fortress, he said. What else would we trade? She curled her fingers tighter around the railing. Hope, I guess. When I was 10, my mother caught sick. Nothing dramatic, just a fever that wouldn't break. Our pack healer did what he could, but remedies cost, and the Alpha said she wasn't priority. Her jaw clenched. She died whispering apologies for leaving us with nothing but debts, and an Omega daughter no one would pay anything for. Ridian's gaze slid to her, sharp and soft at once. Healer should have been dragged to the circle for that. He was following orders, Sylvia said bitterly. We buried her on the hill behind our hut. After that, sleep went next. It's hard to rest when you keep waiting for what's left to be taken piece by piece. She swallowed. Trust was last. I held on to that like an idiot. Trusted that if I worked hard enough, obeyed enough, they'd spare my father. Me. I was wrong. The words hung between them, thin and brittle. My father took trust first, Ridian said eventually. He used it as kindling and lit the rest of us on fire. She glanced over, surprised by the openness in his tone. He was a strong alpha, he went on. Too strong. Somewhere along the line he decided that meant he deserved everything he saw. Land, gold, lives. He taught me that fear was as good as love, better even, because it didn't waver. When I was 12, a rival alpha sent a peace offer. My father had him gutted in front of the whole pack, then turned to me and said, Remember, pup, mercy is how kings die. Her stomach turned. You believed him? I wanted to, Ridian said. He was the only model I had. But my wolf didn't. It hated the smell of that fear. Hated how the pack shrank whenever he entered a room. His hand lifted absent-mindedly to the faint white line over his heart. First time I realized something was wrong, I was 16. We were sparring. He went too far, broke a beta's arm just to make a point. The wolf surged up, not to obey, to stop him. What happened? I blacked out, he said simply. When I woke, 3 men were on the ground, bleeding. My father was smiling. He looked proud, called me his little monster, said nightfall would be safe so long as I pointed that rage outward. Sylvia's chest tightened. You were a child. Not for long, he said. From then on, I knew. Whatever he'd bred into me was more than an alpha's usual strength. Stronger, wilder, less tame. If I lost control, there wouldn't be much throne left to sit on, or pack. And now? She asked softly. Do you still black out? His jaw worked. He stared out over the training grounds, muscles in his shoulders bunching. Some nights, he said, voice low. I feel it rising. The urge to let go. To stop calculating and just tear. His fingers curled on the railing until his knuckles went white. Tonight I shifted alone. Thought the cold would help. It didn't. The wolf wanted out and wanted blood. He turned his head then, really looking at her. The gold in his eyes was darker, molten. It was your scent that pulled me back, he said. The words dragged from somewhere raw. In the middle of it, I caught it on the wind, from this balcony, stubborn and scared and refusing to bow. It cut through everything else. His throat bobbed. That has never happened before. Her breath hitched. You make it sound like a bad thing. It is, he said immediately. For you. For me. For all of us. He huffed out something that wasn't quite a laugh. Do you have any idea what it means? For a king whose wolf barely listens to him to find something it listens to more? Maybe it means you won't rip anyone in half by accident, Sylvia said, trying for flippant and only half managing it. It means, he said, stepping closer, that if anything happens to you, I may not have anything left to pull me back. The air between them crackled. He was close enough now that she could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the notch in his lower lip where an old bite had scarred. That terrifies me more than losing any battle, Her heart pounded. Her wolf pressed toward him helplessly, drawn to the heat and the rough, broken honesty in his voice. She wanted to step back. She didn't move. Rydian. A howl split the night, closer than before, edged with alarm. Another answered. Sharp. A warning. Shouts rang out, muffled through stone. The faint ring of steel on stone. Then a horn's abrupt, jarring note. Rydian snapped toward the sound. His body going rigid. The easy slouch vanished, replaced by a predator coiled and ready. Someone's breached the outer wall, he said, already moving. He caught her by the shoulders, spinning her toward the balcony doors. The easy warmth of before was gone. This was command, cold and absolute. Inside, he ordered. Now, what's happening? Panic spiked, sharp and metallic on her tongue. Uninvited guests, he growled. Maybe testing us, maybe worse. He all but shoved her across the threshold, following long enough to press his palm to a section of wall beside the bed. Runes flared, pale blue, outlining what she'd taken for a decorative panel, a door, hidden and humming with power. He yanked it open to reveal a narrow, warded space barely big enough for her to stand in. The air inside felt thick, muffling scent and sound. Get in, he said, her feet rooted. I'm not hiding in a closet while... Sylvia. Her name cracked out of him like a whip. He grabbed her chin, forcing her eyes to his. You lock this from the inside. You do not open it for anyone but me, no matter what you hear. Understand? Fear clawed up her spine. You think they're here for you, she whispered. Or for me. Doesn't matter, he said. Either way, you stay breathing. He hesitated, thumb brushing once, lightly, against the corner of her mouth, as if reassuring himself she was real. I will come back for you. And if you don't? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Then break the wards and run until your legs give out, he said, but not before dawn. Voices shouted in the corridor now, closer, urgent. A thud rattled the outer door to her chambers. He pushed her gently but firmly into the warded space. The door glowed as it shut, sealing her in a cocoon of dim light and buzzing magic. The last thing she saw was his back as he turned toward the danger, scars and muscles shifting under skin, every line of him a promise of violence. The hidden door clicked. The wards locked into place. Alone in the humming dark, Sylvia pressed her palms flat against the cool stone and listened to the muffled chaos outside, heart pounding in time with the distant howls. The warded dark hummed around Sylvia, a low, constant buzz in her bones. Time stretched thin and strange. She had no window, no moon, just the faint glow of runes seeping around the edges of the hidden door and the muffled roar of chaos beyond. Shouts rose and fell commands, snarls, the crash of something heavy meeting stone. Once, a howl cut through it all, deep and furious. Her wolf recognized it, responded before she could stop it, straining toward the sound. Rydian. Then, as suddenly as the noise had peaked, it dropped. Not into silence, exactly, but into a different kind of quiet, thick, watchful, waiting. Sylvia's palms were slick against the stone. She forced herself to breathe slow, in and out, just like he'd told her. Imagine a door. Close it on the fear. Lock it. Her heart didn't listen. It rabbit-thumped anyway. The first knock was so soft, she almost thought she imagined it. 3 lazy taps against the outer door of her chambers, far beyond the little warded space. Knock, knock, knock. Her skin crawled. The sound was wrong. Not the sharp, economical rap of a soldier, or Rydian's heavy, impatient fist. This was... casual. Amused. Well, this is cozy. The voice slid through the stone like smoke, distorted but clear enough to send a cold line down her spine. Male. Young, maybe, but with an old kind of humor. Smooth as river rock, and edged like broken glass. Let me guess, it went on, conversational. He shoved you into the little hidey hole and told you to be a good girl. Said he'd come back for you. Very romantic, very nightfall. Sylvia's throat closed. She knew that voice. Or rather, she knew the shape of it, the way it curled around certain sounds. Her mother used to tell stories, when storms rattled their thin walls and the wind howled like something nameable. Stories of a wolf who walked outside pack law, who slipped through shadows and packs, always laughing. Or in Flintpaw, the trickster rogue, the wolf who never bowed. You shouldn't be here, she managed, voice barely above a whisper, as if he might somehow hear through layers of stone and warding. "Oh, I should be exactly here," he said cheerfully. There was a scrape, like someone leaning a shoulder lazily against wood. "You, on the other hand, should be almost anywhere else. But that's the nightfall curse for you wrong people in the wrong cages at the wrong time." He tapped again, a gentle, mocking rhythm. "Do you know what happens to things the king's wolf fixates on? Little Hale?" Her name in that voice hit like ice water. She pressed her back harder into the stone, as if she could sink through it. "You don't know me." A low chuckle. "Don't I? Sylvia Emberwyn Hale. 10 when your mother died. 15 when you took her place in the kitchens. 20 when your father finally gambled away more than his blood could pay. I make it a point to know interesting bloodlines." Her pulse spiked. "I'm nobody." "Ah," Orin said softly. "That's what they told you. How convenient for them. Here's a secret. Little wolf, no one signs a blood contract with the Nightfall throne over a nobody. Gold, land, flesh, yes. But this?" His voice dropped, silk over a knife. "This was about lineage. About what your blood can wake up that Rydian's has been strangling for years." The wards thrummed, as if reacting to the name. Sylvia swallowed hard. "If you're trying to scare me, you're doing an excellent job." "Scare you?" he mused. "No, I'm just balancing the board. You should know why the king can't take his eyes off you. Why his wolf stopped tearing the world apart the moment he scented you." Her hand flew to her throat, to the place his fingers had rested, hot and horrible and too gentle. "He's obsessed because I smell nice?" she said, bitter. "That's hardly new." "That's not obsession," Orin said. "That's recognition. Your line and his are older than most of the bricks in that fortress. When they cross." He whistled low. "Well, crowns fall, wars end. Sometimes whole forests burn. Depends on who does the choosing." Her head spun. Old stories rose up unbidden. Tales of a first wolf and a first Omega whose bond held the world in place. Myths, she'd always thought. Pretty lies to make Omegas feel important before they were shoved back into the kitchens. "You're lying," she said. "You don't know anything about my line." "If you truly believe that," he said gently, "you're not nearly as clever as you pretended in the throne room." She bristled. "And what exactly do you get out of telling me this?" A pause. She imagined him smiling, all teeth. "Let's say I don't like seeing old patterns repeat. And I don't trust Rydian Voss Nightfall not to choose for you. Once he realizes what you are, he will not let you go. Not after 3 nights. Not after 3 years. Not ever." The words hit harder than they should have, because some part of her had already suspected it, had heard it in the way he said her name, had seen it in the way his eyes went dark whenever she stood too far away. Footsteps pounded past outside multiple sets, fast and purposeful. Someone shouted an order. The air shivered with a familiar authority. "You're out of time, little Hale," Orin said. "The king's coming. Ask him about the last Omega who thought she could be his salvation." Another gentle knock, like the end of a joke. "And next time you dream of being no one, remember monsters don't waste chains on nobodies." The pressure of his presence lifted. She felt it, like a storm cloud moving on. After a few heartbeats, the outer door slammed open. "Sylvia!" Rydian's voice, harsh and ragged, cut through the muffling wards. "Open up." Her fingers fumbled at the inner latch. The runes flared, protesting, but the door gave. She stumbled out into her chamber, blinking against the sudden brightness. Rydian stood just inside the room, Thorn and Lysandra flanking him. All 3 stank of adrenaline and steel and fresh blood. The king's bare torso was smeared with it, a crimson streak across his ribs, another dripping slowly from a gash at his shoulder. His hair clung damply to his forehead. His eyes were too bright, too wild. Thorn's cheek bore a shallow claw mark, already knitting. Lysandra's gown was torn at the hem, a smear of someone else's blood on her throat like a macabre necklace. "What happened?" Sylvia blurted. "A test," Thorn said curtly, scanning the room, nostrils flaring as if searching for a trace of someone else. "Not a real breach, probing for weaknesses. Did they find any?" she asked. Rydian's gaze snapped to her, pinning her in place. For a moment, something in his expression softened relief, sharp and almost painful. Then the mask slammed back down. "Not where it matters," he said. His voice was rough, frayed at the edges. "Thorn, Lysandra. Out." Lysandra's brows arched. "You sure you want to be alone with her like this, brother?" "You're frayed." Now, he growled, a beat of silent challenge. Then Lysandra shrugged, lips curving with a secret she didn't share, and swept out. Thorne hesitated a fraction longer, eyes flicking from Rydian's bleeding shoulder to Sylvia's pale face, then followed, shutting the outer door with a solid thud. The room felt suddenly smaller. Rydian's shoulders sagged a fraction once they were gone. He braced one hand on the bedpost, the other pressed to his side. Blood seeped between his fingers, dark against his skin. "You're hurt," Sylvia said. "Not badly." He eyed the warded panel, still humming faintly. "Did anyone come to the door?" She hesitated. Oren's voice curled like smoke in her memory. "Ask him about the last Omega. Just you," she lied. His jaw tightened, but he let it go. "For now." "Sit," she said, surprising herself. When he didn't move, she stepped closer, tugged at his wrist. "If you bleed out after making such a dramatic exit, I'll be very annoyed." His lips twitched, despite everything. "Bossy for an Omega. Someone has to be," she muttered, pushing him down onto the edge of the bed. Up close, the wounds were easier to see. A long slash along his ribs, shallow but angry. A deeper puncture at his shoulder where something with claws had tried to tear in. The smell of blood, his blood was thick and heady, making her wolf restless. She fetched the basin and bandages from where she'd seen them earlier, hands moving on a strange, automatic calm. Her mother had taught her basic tending before the pack decided Omegas were better used scrubbing floors than saving lives. "Hold still," she said. "Don't order your king," he murmured, but he didn't flinch when the cloth, wet and cool, touched torn flesh. They worked in silence at first. She cleaned. He endured. His muscles jumped occasionally under her touch, but he stayed absurdly, almost stubbornly still, as if any movement might shatter something fragile hanging between them. "You were going to tell me," she said eventually, voice low, "about another Omega, someone who tried to save you." His breath left him in a slow exhale. "Oren's been talking," he guessed. She didn't confirm or deny. She dabbed at the blood on his shoulder instead, watching it smear, then fade. "Her name was Mira," he said. "She was from a border pack. Smart, brave. Thought she could fix Nightfall from the inside. Everyone told her to run when she got close enough to see the cracks. She didn't. Did you claim her?" The words scratched her tongue. "No." His gaze was fixed on some point over her shoulder. "I wanted to. My wolf wanted to. But she wanted a king who could promise her things I didn't know how to give. A softer court. A gentler throne. I was still my father's son back then. More monster than man. I told myself letting her go was mercy." "Was it?" Sylvia asked. He finally looked at her. There was old regret in his eyes, and something like fear. She left before the council could decide how they felt about a foreign Omega whispering in the king's ear. Before my enemies realized what she meant to my wolf. A humorless smile. Oren helped her vanish. "Sometimes I think that was the only truly selfless thing I've ever done." "Why tell me?" she whispered. "Why me and not her?" "Because with Mira, I still believed I could stand alone," he said. "I thought wanting was the problem, that if I never wanted anything enough, I couldn't be used against myself." His hand rose, almost without his permission, fingers brushing the inside of her wrist where her pulse fluttered. "Then you walked into my throne room, and every part of me that I had buried for years sat up and howled." Her skin burned under his touch. "That's not my fault." "No," he agreed. "It's mine, and my curses, and whatever our ancestors thought they were doing when they tangled our bloodlines together." Her breath stuttered. "So what now?" "Now," he said, drawing his hand back as if it cost him. "I try to be smarter than I was before. I try not to turn you into a symbol or a solution. I try to treat you like a person, even while every instinct I have is screaming to mark you and lock you away where no one can touch you." She tied the last bandage, fingers trembling. "And if you fail?" He held her gaze, the wild gold in his eyes tempered by something quieter. "Then I become the monster my father always wanted, and you become the first thing he finally gets to destroy in me." The honesty of it stole her breath. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Sylvia sat back, wiping her hands on a cloth. "I won't be your redemption," she said softly. "But I also won't make it easy for you to become that monster." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "I never expected you to make anything easy." Outside, the fortress groaned and settled, night closing in once more. Inside, in the circle of firelight around the bed, An injured king and a debtor's omega regarded each other like two creatures who had just realized the bars between them were thinner than they'd thought. A hand clamped over Sylvia's mouth just as dawn's first gray light seeped through the barred window. She jolted awake, heart slamming, but the scent hit her before panic could pine, smoke, blood. Rydian. His eyes were inches from hers, wild gold dulled by urgency, a fresh bruise blooming along his jaw. Quiet, he breathed, finger to his lips. We're leaving, now. She nodded against his palm. He released her, already moving to the wardrobe, tossing a heavy wool cloak over her shoulders. It smelled of him, warm and commanding, swallowing her smaller frame. Pack light, cloak pocket only. Food, knife if you have one. No more. Her mind raced as she scrambled for boots, stuffing a water skin and the dagger from her belt into the folds. What's happening? Oren's scouts got too close last night. Word spreading faster than I can contain it. He shrugged into a leather vest, buckling straps with swift efficiency, a short sword already sheathed at his thigh. Lysandra and Thorn will hold the fortress. We're going where no one's eyes reach. Going where? His gaze met hers, hard as flint. The old forest, Nightfall's cradle. Answers wait there if we reach it alive. She didn't argue. The air in the room felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. He led her through a side passage she'd never noticed. Stone grinding shut behind them. Fog clung thick to the outer yard, muffling the world in white. Thorn waited with 3 sturdy horses, his face a mask of grim lines, saddlebags packed tight. Tracks lead south already, Thorn said by way of greeting, swinging up. Rivals or Oren's dogs. Either way, they're smelling blood. Rydian boosted Sylvia onto the middle horse, his hands lingering a beat too long at her waist. Stay between us. Ride hard. They melted into the mist like ghosts, hooves muffled on damp earth. The fortress shrank behind them, swallowed by swirling gray. No trumpets, no farewells, just the creak of leather and the rhythm of urgent flight. The forest swallowed them whole within the hour. Ancient trees loomed, trunks thick as houses, branches woven into a canopy that choked out the weak dawn. Moss dripped from boughs, roots snaking the narrow path like veins. The air grew cooler, heavier, laced with the tang of wild earth and something older magic, perhaps, or just the weight of forgotten centuries. Sylvia rode close behind Rydian, the horse's steady gait lulling her nerves, but not her questions. Thorn brought up the rear, eyes scanning shadows. Fog lingered here, unnatural, curling like fingers around their legs. Why the old forest? She asked when silence pressed too heavy. What answers? Rydian didn't turn. Nightfall wasn't built on stone. It was carved from prophecy. Blood oaths from the first pack. My line's been unraveling them ever since. She leaned forward, voice pitched low. And Oren's right? About my blood? His shoulders tensed under the cloak. Oren's never wrong about what serves him. But yes, something in you calls to mine. I felt it the moment you walked in chained. Tell me, she pressed. The truth. No more half-shadows. He reined in slightly, glancing back. Thorn nodded once clear for now, and fell back further to scout. Rydian's voice dropped, rough with reluctance. The Nightfall curse, not a legend, a binding. The first Alpha King bound his sanity to an Omega's line to leash his power. Without that bond, the wolf consumes the man. Rage without reason, blood for blood's sake. Her breath caught. And you? Have no bond. The words landed like stones. My father refused one, drove himself mad. I swore the same. Control the beast, don't feed it. But my wolf, he gripped the reins tighter. It's fraying, faster since you arrived. Your scent doesn't just calm it, it anchors it. Like the curse recognizes its due. Sylvia swallowed against the chill, racing her spine. So I'm your salvation, or your chain, both, he said flatly. And if Oren knows your line traces to that first Omega, he'll use you to snap mine entirely. The forest thickened, path narrowing to single file. Thorn's low whistle cut the quiet warning. Rydian drew his blade in a silver flash, urging his horse forward. Too late. Shadows erupted from the underbrush, 6 figures, cloaked and feral, eyes gleaming with rogue hunger. Not wolves, but half-shifted mercenaries, claws extended, teeth bared in unnatural grins. Paid blades, Oren's or a rival's, blocking the path. King's Run, one snarled, lunging. Rydian met the first midair, blade biting deep, horse rearing. Thorn charged from behind, axe swinging. Sylvia's mount shied, throwing her half off balance. Claws raked the air inches from her leg. Panic surged, then something deeper cracked open inside her. Heat bloomed in her chest, wild and silver bright, rushing down her arms like liquid moonlight. Her vision sharpened, sense exploding. Rot on the mercenaries' breath, fierce wet under their cloaks, the copper tang of blood already spilled. Her hands moved without thought, palms flaring with ethereal light. One attacker leaped for her throat. She thrust out a hand and force slammed him back, body crumpling against a tree trunk with a crack of bone. Another swung low. She twisted, light coiling from her fingers like whips, snapping his arm clean. Rydian dispatched his foe and wheeled, eyes widening at the sight. Sylvia cloak askew, glowing runes tracing her skin, 2 mercenaries writhing at her feet. Thorn felled the last, breathing hard. Moonfire, he rasped. Old blood. Sylvia stared at her hands, light fading, trembling. Power hummed in her veins, alien and right. Oren's words echoed. Your line is older and more dangerous than you know. Rydian dismounted in a rush, gripping her shoulders. Sylvia. Look at me. She did. His face was a storm shock, hunger, fear. You wielded it, untrained. Like the first herself. What am I? She whispered. He pulled her close, breath ragged against her hair. The key. And now every shadow knows it. Behind them, Thorn scanned the trees. More coming. We ride. The forest seemed to lean in, watching. Sylvia mounted, power still thrumming faintly under her skin. Whatever she'd unleashed proved Oren right and changed everything. The wilds weren't running anymore. They were hunting. The cliff rose out of the forest like the spine of some sleeping beast, all jagged stone and moss-slicked ledges. Vines clung to the rock face, veiling a dark opening halfway up where the path finally ended. The horses snorted and tossed their heads, whites of their eyes flashing as if something in the air offended them. Rydian swung down first, palm resting briefly on his mount's neck in a soothing stroke that was really for himself. His gaze tracked the mouth of the cave, no torches, no guards, just a blackness that felt aware. This is it? Sylvia asked, sliding to the ground. Her legs ached from the ride, and under her skin the echo of whatever power she'd used in the woods still hummed like a half-remembered song. The ancestral den, Thorn said. Even his voice was quieter here. Seat of the first Nightfall Alpha. Last place my king brings anyone. Last place his father brought us, came another voice, dry as autumn leaves. Though he had less grace when he arrived, a figure stepped out of the shadows at the cave's mouth. At first, Sylvia thought it was a crone, bent and small, wrapped in layered gray furs. Then the woman straightened, and the illusion of frailty melted away. She was old. Yes, hair a cloud of silver braids, skin lined like river maps, but her eyes were sharp yellow, glowing faintly in the gloom. A wolf still lived very much inside her. Era, Rydian said, and for the first time since Sylvia had met him, there was something like respect, without calculation in his tone. You look unchanged. You look tired, Era replied. Her gaze slid over him, lingering on the bandage peeking under his tunic, the tension in his jaw. Too much stone, not enough root under your feet. Then her eyes shifted to Sylvia, and the air seemed to tighten. Those golden irises flared, pupils narrowing. The scent of smoke and crushed herbs drifted from her as she stepped closer. Well, Era murmured, more to herself than anyone. The world finally grows bored of repeating one half of the story. Sylvia swallowed. I what? Era ignored the question, reaching out with a hand that looked fragile but felt like iron when her fingers wrapped gently around Sylvia's chin. She tilted her face up, inhaled near her throat. Sylvia's wolf bristled, but something in the elder's touch was so absolute, so grounded, that protest died before it reached her tongue. Moonfire, Era said softly, and marrow bond. You smell like silver trees and old promises, like someone hid you in plain sight and hoped the forest would forget. Rydian stiffened. You recognize her. I recognize her blood, Era said, releasing Sylvia. Bring them in. The stones listen better when they can breathe. Inside, the den widened into a cavern whose roof soared out of sight, lost in shadow. Pale roots dangled from above, glowing faintly, casting everything in soft, ghostly light. The walls were carved with spirals and wolves and crescent moons, each line worn smooth by time and touch. At the center, a shallow pool reflected their faces in ripples of silver. Era moved like she belonged to the rock. Sit, she ordered, pointing to the flat stones near the pool. You, King. There. Girl, here. Sylvia glanced at Rydian. He nodded once, the tiniest motion, then lowered himself where she'd indicated. He looked bigger in this space and somehow smaller, his crown invisible and irrelevant. Era faced them, staff planted firmly. You've come because the curse is waking, because your wolf chews at its leash, and the court whispers about whether you'll end like your father. Her gaze flicked to Sylvia again, and because she burned the woods without fire. I didn't, Sylvia began. You did, Ira said simply. Moonfire without training. It didn't kill you. That's miracle enough. Thorn lingered near the entrance, a silent shadow. When Era's eyes cut his way, he straightened. I'll stand watch. Good, she said. This is not for stone ears. When he was gone, the elder dipped her fingers into the pool, scattering droplets that glowed as they fell. Listen, children of Nightfall, this is older than your titles. She traced a symbol in the damp rock, 2 circles intertwined, a wolf and a smaller shape tucked within. Before there was a fortress, before the first stone was laid, there was a forest and a madness. The first wolf hunted without end, strong enough to kill anything, too strong to know when to stop. Your ancestor, she said to Rydian, an alpha whose rage threatened to tear the pack, the land, the very sky apart. He asked the moon for a leash. She sent him an omega. Her staff tapped, the sound echoing. Not just any, the first omega, born under an eclipse, blood bright with moonfire. Her presence calmed him, her scent anchored him. Alone, he was a storm. With her, he was a king. Sylvia's heart thudded, slow and heavy. That's just a story. All stories are warnings in prettier clothes, Era replied. Their bond tied his mind to hers. If he strayed too far from what they built together, if he turned his teeth inward on his own, the moonfire would burn him out. A circuit breaker, your humans might call it. Balance, the wolves did. Rydian's jaw clenched. The Nightfall curse. Era nodded. Your line kept the alpha blood. Her line kept the moonfire. Together, a crown. Apart, a slow unraveling. Her gaze softened. Just a fraction. Your father chose unraveling. He feared any leash, even one offered in love. And my family? Sylvia whispered. Hales are peasants, debtors. No one. Era laughed, a dry, almost fond bark. Is that what they told you while they ground your bones into their bread? She moved closer, cupping Sylvia's face briefly again, eyes searching. Hale is what remained when your true name was burned off your door. Your line were once guardians' shields between the alpha and the world. You stood at the king's side in the first days, when the forest was still deciding if it would keep you. Sylvia's stomach lurched. Guardians, not kitchen workers, not background ghosts. What happened? Rydian asked, voice low. Fear, Era said simply. Jealousy. A king 3 generations back decided he didn't like how much his wolf listened when a guardian spoke. Advisors whispered that the bond was a shackle, that strength meant standing alone. So he cut you out, exiled your branch, smeared your name, pretended the moonfire would never be needed again. She shrugged. The forest remembered. Blood remembers hardest. Sylvia thought of her mother's tired eyes, the way her father had flinched whenever Nightfall's name was spoken. How had they carried this without knowing what it was? And Orin? Rydian asked, anger threading through his words. What game is he playing? Era's mouth thinned. Orin Flintpaw is a creature of balance in his own twisted way. He sees the curse fraying your mind and the courts circling like crows. He sees a guardian line resurfaced in a debtor's skin. He wants to restore the old story, but on his terms. Restore how? Sylvia asked, dread coiling. By using me? By putting you back where your blood began, Era said. At the Alpha's side, as leash, shield, sacrifice. He doesn't much care which, so long as it resets the board. She pointed at Rydian. If you fall to madness, he benefits. If you bind to her and she dies, stopping you, he benefits. If you both survive and break the old patterns, then perhaps for once, he does not. That is what makes him nervous. Rydian's hands had curled into fists on his knees. The air around him felt charged, like the edge of a storm. You're saying keeping her near me is exactly what the curse wants. I'm saying, Era replied, that the curse doesn't care about want. It cares about balance. Your wolf has already chosen its anchor. Sending her away won't change that. It will only leave you unmoored, and paint a bigger target on her back. Sylvia's chest felt too small. So what then? I stay. And I'm your leash? Your failsafe? Not leash, Era said sharply. Partner. The first Omega didn't just soothe the wolf. She told him no. She told him when to sit down, when to listen, when to spare instead of slaughter. Guardians are not ornaments, girl. They are the hand on the crown that keeps it from slipping. Rydian looked at Sylvia then, really looked, as if seeing not the Omega dragged in chains but the shadow of something older standing behind her. Fear, yes, but also fire. It's selfish, he said hoarsely. To keep her, to bind her into this. Era's gaze softened with an old, tired compassion. It is selfish, she agreed. And it is necessary. Your enemies already know enough to hunt her. Your wolf already knows enough to need her. The only question left is whether you both admit it and build something new from the wreckage, or let others decide the shape of your story. Silence settled, heavy and thick. The pool at their feet reflected three faces. A king with too much weight in his eyes, an Omega with power she hadn't asked for, and an elder who had seen this dance too many times. Sylvia wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. And if I say I don't want any of it? The crown, the curse, this bond? Her voice cracked on the last word. Era's look was not unkind. The moon gave you a choice when she put you in his path instead of under another alpha's boot. Choice is not the same as escape, girl. But you can decide what to make of what you've been handed. Rydian's hand moved, hesitated, then settled lightly on the stone between them, fingers splayed as if reaching without quite touching. If you walk, he said quietly, I will still burn that contract. I will send you as far as my reach can push you, and hope it's enough. His throat worked. But if you stay, I will have to become something my father never was. For you. For them. He tipped his head slightly, indicating the invisible weight of the realm. For myself. She looked at him, at the cracks in his composure, at the way his wolf brushed against her own without breaching. Selfish and necessary. Leash and partner. Prison and possibility. The den seemed to hold its breath, roots pulsing faintly overhead. I don't forgive the way this started, Sylvia said finally, voice low but steady. You still bought me. You still put me in chains, even if you cut them after. But I'm already in your story, Rydian. Running hasn't saved me yet. She exhaled. Years of helplessness, leaving on the same breath. So if I stay, it's on my terms. Guardian, not pet. Partner, not ornament. And if I tell you no, you listen. Something raw flickered in his eyes, then settled into something harder. A vow. Maybe. Agreed, he said. Era smiled then, small and fierce. Good. Perhaps this time the forest will get an ending it hasn't already memorized. By the time the fortress came into view again, the sky was already bruising toward dusk. Nightfall rose out of the cliffs like it had been carved from the same darkness that pooled in the valleys below. Torches burned along the walls, brighter than usual, their flames licking higher, as if the stone itself were nervous. Banners snapped in the growing wind, the silver wolf on black seeming to watch their approach with cold, knowing eyes. Sylvia adjusted her cloak, fingers worrying the edge of the fabric. Even from this distance, she could feel the pack shifting. Wolves returning from the outlying lands, messengers racing along the parapets, the hum of anticipation that always preceded a full moon gathering. Tonight, they would all be there. And for the first time, she wouldn't be hidden in some shadowed corner. She would be at the Alpha King's side. Rydian rode ahead, posture rigid in the saddle, carrying the weight of a crown no one could see but everyone felt. Thorn peeled off toward the barracks as they passed through the gates, barking orders before the hoofbeats had even faded. The courtyard buzzed, then stilled as Rydian dismounted, Sylvia sliding to the ground a heartbeat after him. Eyes followed them, some curious, some calculating, a few openly hostile. The scent of it all, interest, skepticism, thin edges of fear brushed against Sylvia's skin like sandpaper. Rydian's hand settled at the small of her back, firm and unmistakably possessive. Head up, he murmured. If you walk in like prey, they'll treat you like it. Noted, she muttered. You planning on answering the question stamped on every face out here, or just glaring until they choke on it? His mouth twitched, but he didn't answer. Not yet. They reached his private wing without incident, doors shutting behind them with a weighty thud that cut off the murmur of the fortress. Inside, The air felt thicker, charged, as if the stone remembered every full moon before this one and was waiting to see if tonight would be a repeat or a rupture. In his chambers, attendants hovered with garments and combs and bowls of water scented with herbs. Rydian dismissed them with a curt wave. Out. Both of us will dress ourselves. Sylvia waited until the latch clicked, then turned on him. No more dodging, she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The pool of power inside her, stirred awake in the forest and tempered in the den, glowed like banked coals. Before I step into that hall and let an entire kingdom see me at your side, I need to know something, and you're going to answer honestly. He paused halfway out of his vest, brows lifting. You're giving orders to your king again. Seems to be the only way to get a straight answer, she shot back. Are you keeping me because your wolf needs me to stay sane, or because you want me? Her throat worked around the words. If I was just some convenient anchor, any Omega with the right bloodline would do. So which is it, Rydian? Need or want? Silence pressed in, thick and heavy. His jaw flexed. He shrugged the vest off the rest of the way, tossing it aside, then took a slow step toward her. He wasn't dressed for ceremony yet, just in rough linen and old scars, and somehow that made him more dangerous. You think those are different things for me, he said quietly, as if I can pull them apart and weigh them on separate scales. His gaze searched her face, lingering at her mouth before dragging back to her eyes. My wolf needs you. That's the curse's doing, the old bond waking up, whatever name you want to give it. You steady the part of me that would otherwise chew through bone and stone and law. A muscle jumped in his cheek. But I want you, Sylvia. Not just your blood, not just your power. You. The word landed like a stone between them. The way you argue. The way you stand your ground even when fear is chewing at your ankles. The way you look at me like I'm both the man who bought you and the man you dare to expect better from. Heat prickled behind her eyes, infuriating and sharp. That doesn't erase what you did. I know, he said. It doesn't erase the chains. It doesn't erase the bargain. It doesn't erase the fact that you were given no choice at the start. He took another step. Close enough now that she could feel the warmth radiating off his skin. But whatever this becomes after tonight, after the full moon, after the pack sees you, it has to be built on truth, or it will break the first time the wind changes. She searched his face, looking for the lie, the angle. All she found was exhaustion and a kind of raw, almost painful sincerity that made her chest ache. You realize, she said slowly, that if you stand me beside you out there, you can't shove me back into the shadows when it's convenient. You can't call me guardian in private and Omega like a title in public. If you use this bond to cage me instead of protect me, I will walk. Her voice didn't waver. I don't care if it tears half your wolf with me. His eyes flared, gold burning hotter. For a second, something hungry and possessive snarled just beneath the surface. Then, with visible effort, he forced it down. He exhaled, long and slow, like someone settling shackles on his own wrists. Then I won't use it to cage you, he said. If I ever turn this bond into a chain, you have my promise you walk, and I will not drag you back. His lips curled, humorless. I may go mad without you, but I won't make you watch it. It wasn't a pretty vow. It was too honest for that. That somehow made it more real. And tonight? She asked. What am I to them? What am I to you? Hung between the words. He studied her for a heartbeat, then reached out, fingers hovering near her cheek. When she didn't pull away, he brushed an errant strand of hair back, the touch almost careful enough to be reverent. Tonight, he said, you are the woman who stands at the Alpha King's side when the moon is full and the pack is watching. Not as a trophy, not as a insult, as the one thing between me and the worst version of myself. His throat worked. If we survive their judgment, if the challengers fail, if the council doesn't try to tear us apart, I will stop pretending you are anything less than what you are. Her heart stuttered. And what is that, exactly? His gaze dropped to her mouth, lingered there, then lifted. Whatever he saw on her face made his next words come out rougher. My chosen, my guardian. The Omega my wolf has already claimed even if my teeth haven't. The room felt too small. She stepped back, needing space to think, to breathe. The cloak tugged at her shoulders, heavy with the weight of everything he was asking her to be. Guardian, partner, symbol. You say that, she said. But when we step into that hall, they're going to see a debtor's Omega you pulled from the gutter. They'll smell my old pack on me under all this nightfall smoke. They'll decide what I am to you before you ever open your mouth. Then I'll have to use my mouth to correct them, he said, a flicker of dark humor cutting through the tension. You're not the only one who can speak, Sylvia, she huffed despite herself. You realize you just promised to tell the entire pack that you, what was it, want me? He inclined his head. If that is the price of making them understand you are not disposable, then yes. Fear and something hotter twisted together in her stomach. Being invisible had been its own kind of prison. Being seen like this would be another. But at least this time, she wouldn't be standing there alone, waiting for decisions made in rooms she never entered to fall on her head. Fine, she said. We'll walk in together. I'll stand at your side. I'll keep your wolf from tearing the walls down. But if you falter, if you forget what you just promised, remember this is my life on the line too, not just your crown. His expression shifted, something like pride flaring through the weariness. You sound like Aira, he said. I'll take that as a compliment, Sylvia replied. He reached for his formal leathers then, the ones etched with silver wolves and old runes, shrugging them on with practiced movements. She turned to the wardrobe, fingers tracing the rich fabric of the gown laid out for her deep night blue, simple but cut to flatter, a silver thread along the hem mimicking moonlight. When she pulled it on, it fit too perfectly, as if the den itself had whispered her measurements to the fortress. When they faced each other again, something shifted in the space between them. The king and the Omega were still there, but layered over now were the thin outlines of something else, not quite equal, not yet, but pointed in that direction. Guardian, Alpha. Two halves of a story the forest was tired of watching end badly. Rydian offered his arm. Ready? No, she said honestly, then slid her hand into the crook of his elbow anyway. But I'm going. A low hum settled over her skin at the contact, his wolf brushing against hers, a wordless acknowledgement. He drew in a breath, like someone about to jump into a cold river, then opened the door. The sound hit them first, the rise and fall of voices, the restless shuffle of bodies, the distant thud of drums calling the pack to assembly. The moon's pull pressed faintly at the edges of Sylvia's mind, promising a night that would strip away lies and leave only what could survive the light. Rydian glanced down at her one last time, something like a question in his eyes. If we come out of this alive, he said quietly, just for her, there will be no more hiding. Not of you, not of what you are to me. Her chest tightened, painful and sharp. She nodded once. Then let's give them something worth staring at, she said, lifting her chin. Together they stepped into the hall, into the noise and the light and the gaze of a kingdom that had no idea the ground was already shifting under its feet. The arena had never felt so small. Stone tiers rose in a rough circle around the packed earth, every ledge and stair crowded with bodies. Wolves in human skin, shoulders touching, breaths fogging in the chill night. Above them all, the moon hung bloated and bright, its light turning every edge into silver and every shadow into something sharp. Sylvia stood at the edge of the circle, Rydian at her side, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. It was a subtle contact, easily missed by anyone too far away to scent the current thrumming between them. Up close, it felt like a brand. The drum beats slowed, then stopped. A hush rolled outward, swallowing the murmurs, the rustle of cloaks. All that remained was the sound of the wind and the dull roar of blood in her ears. Rydian stepped forward, letting his gaze sweep the gathered pack. His voice, when it came, carried without effort. Nightfall. A ripple passed through the crowd at the weight of that word. Not a title, an invocation. Every full moon, we come here to remember what we are, he said. A pack, a kingdom, a line that has outlived wars and winters and kings who deserved neither crown nor breath. A faint, hard smile. Tonight, we remember something else. Why the moon bound an Omega line to ours in the first place. Eyes turned toward Sylvia like a wave. She felt the weight of it settle on her skin. Curiosity, disdain, hunger, hope. She resisted the urge to tug her cloak tighter. She's an Omega, someone muttered. A debtor's girl who walked back from the old forest alive, another answered, lower. With the king. Weak leash, someone else scoffed. Or a noose, came a near voiceless reply. Rydian heard all of it. His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away from the crowd. Some of you, he continued, would rather forget the old stories. You like your kings unchecked, your wolves unbound. You call it strength. His gaze grew flintier. You watched my father descend into madness and comforted yourselves with the lie that it was an unfortunate exception, not the inevitable end of a curse you refused to name. A murmur, uneasy this time. She is not an exception, he said, tipping his head toward Sylvia. She is the point. Is she? A new voice cut across the arena, light and mocking. Funny. From where I'm standing, she looks like a very pretty secret. You hoped no one would notice until it was too late. Orin Flintpaw stepped into the circle as if the ground had been waiting for him. No fanfare, no herald. One moment he was in the crowd, a ripple in the shadows. The next, he was there, boots scuffing the dust, cloak billowing slightly in the moon's breath. He wore no crest. His clothes were travel-worn, hair tied back in a careless knot, eyes bright and amused. A rogue through and through. The pack's tension snapped tighter. Orin, Thorn growled from his place near the front, hand on his axe. Relax, Ironcrest, Orin said, flashing teeth. I came as a guest, mostly. Consider me. His eyes slid to Rydian. An envoy of all the questions your king hasn't let you ask. Rydian's wolf pushed against his skin, a faint glow brightening his gaze. You don't belong in this circle. Neither did she, Orin said mildly, nodding toward Sylvia. Until you dragged her in. The words sliced clean. Sylvia's spine straightened, heat licking up her neck. She refused to flinch. Orin turned slowly, addressing the crowd now. Brothers. Sisters. You've all been wondering about the little Omega your king fetched to his side. You smelled the change in him the moment her boots touched this stone. He spread his arms, easy, inviting. Allow me to put a few rumors to bed. He pointed at Sylvia, and she felt the gesture like a finger pressing between her ribs. She is not just a debtor's daughter, not some tavern stray he took pity on. She is Hale in name only. In blood she is guardian, direct descendant of the first Omega who bound the Nightfall curse. The one line your kings had to keep close or risk losing their minds entirely. A gasp tore through the arena. The word guardian ricocheted off stone and hearts alike. Lies, someone snarled. Is it? Orin cocked his head. Ask your elders. Ask the stones. Ask the way your king's eyes stopped going. Quite so empty the night she arrived. Rydian took a step toward him, power rolling off him like heat from banked coals. You come into my arena and speak of things you barely understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, Orin said, all levity gone from his voice now. I understand that you have what no king before you has had in generations, a living guardian with moonfire in her veins. I also understand that instead of declaring her as your equal and binding the curse properly, you tucked her away in your wing like a guilty secret. His gaze sharpened. What are you afraid of, Rydian? Them seeing her, or her seeing you? The crowd shifted. This was more than spectacle now. This was confession, trial, prophecy. The old ways and the new, grinding against each other like tectonic plates. Lysandra stepped forward from the front rank, crimson cloak flaring. Orin speaks with half-truths, she said, voice clear and cold. Yes, the Guardian line has resurfaced. Yes, my brother has delayed making that public. He did so to keep her alive. Her eyes swept the crowd. We all know what certain factions would do if they had a guardian without a king's protection. And if the king's protection is the problem? Someone shouted from the back. He bought her, chained her. Is that a bond? Or a cage with nicer walls? All eyes swung to Thorn. His face was carved from granite, every line there long before tonight. I've served this line since I was old enough to hold a blade, he said slowly. I watched the last king slip into madness while we all pretended it was just battle scars. We were wrong. He looked at Sylvia, something like apology flickering under his grimness. I also saw what happened to the last woman who tried to stand between a Nightfall Alpha and his curse. He turned to the crowd again. If we repeat that mistake, if we turn our backs on the balance the moon offered us, we deserve whatever ruin comes. So you back this? Orin asked. This king keeping a guardian on a leash and calling it mercy? Thorn's jaw flexed. I back a guardian who can walk out of this fortress and never return, he said. And I back her if she chooses to stay and put a hand on his crown. Sylvia's breath caught. That, more than any oath, felt like a line being drawn. The moon's pull intensified, a slow, insistent drag under her skin. Wolves shifted restlessly on the outer tiers, some already half-changed, teeth glinting when they bared them. Rydian's control frayed at the edges. Sylvia could feel it like standing too close to a storm as it built, air buzzing, pressure dropping. His fingers twitched where his hand hung at his side. His eyes weren't just glowing now, they were almost fully molten, pupils a thin fighting slash. Enough games, he said, voice lower, threaded with something not quite human. You wanted truth, Orin. You wanted them to see what I've kept in the shadows. He turned then toward Sylvia. The arena blurred at the edges of her vision. For a heartbeat, there was only him hard lines, barely leashed power, the faint tremor in his hand as he lifted it. Sylvia Emberwyn Hale, he said, and her name rolled across the stone like a spell. I brought you here in chains. I shoved you into a bargain you didn't choose. For that, I will spend the rest of my life in your debt. His throat moved. But make no mistake. The moment your scent hit this stone, my wolf knew you. Not as payment, not as ornament, as mine. Gasps, snarls, disbelieving laughs. Someone shouted, he admits it. Another, blasphemy. His gaze never left hers. Not mine as a possession, he said, louder now, cutting through the swell. Mine as a mate, as guardian, as equal. The last word cracked like thunder. She is the other half of the throne this line was built for. The leash and the hand and the damn spine I never had until she stood in front of me and told me no. The moon surged over them, a silver tide. Rydian's wolf lunged, senses overwhelmed by challenge, fear, the taste of his own vulnerability. His back arched slightly, breath sawing, bones wanted to shift. Teeth wanted to lengthen. The crowd smelled it. Wolves near the edge of the arena bared their fangs, some delighted, some terrified. Chaos trembled on a knife's edge. Rydian, Sylvia said, stepping toward him. He didn't seem to hear. His head tipped back, a low growl spilling out, rising, fighting with the words he'd just spoken. The curse tugged at him, old and patient. This, it whispered, is what happens when you want too much. Sylvia crossed the remaining distance and laid her hand flat on his chest, right over the thin scar she knew marked his heart. Look at me, she said. His eyes snapped down, wild. For a second, she saw nothing of the man, only the wolf, furious and frightened. Rydian, she repeated, voice steady even as her own bones hummed with the moon's pull. You asked for a leash. I'm right here. You don't get to tear this place apart because you're scared of being seen. Breathe. His chest heaved under her palm. Instinct screamed at her to back away, to bare her throat, to run. She didn't move. You wanted truth? She said, not sure if she was talking to him or the pack or herself. Here it is. I am not your toy. I am not your excuse. I am not your redemption. But I am your choice. You can either stand with me in it, or drown alone. Something in him snagged on that word choice. The wolf bared its teeth, then hesitated, confused by the lack of fear in the scent pouring off her. Her moonfire stirred, rising to meet the crackling rage in him, not to smother it, but to steady it. Balance, Era had said. A circuit breaker. Slowly, painfully, his shoulders dropped a fraction. The sound in his chest shifted from an oncoming roar to a rough, shaking breath. His fingers, clenched into claws, uncurled enough to brush her arm. Stay, he rasped, and she knew he meant more than just this moment. I will, she said. If you do. The pack watched, transfixed, as the Alpha King pulled his wolf back from the edge, not because he'd cowed it into submission, but because an Omega with fire in her blood had asked him to. Orin tilted his head, something like grudging admiration flickering across his face. Well, he said softly, that's one way to do it. Blasphemy, someone muttered again, weaker this time. Evolution, Lysandra countered sharply. You wanted a king who wouldn't turn into his father? This is what it looks like. Thorn stepped forward, dropping to one knee and striking his fist to the earth. Nightfall bows to the balance, he said. It wasn't the old oath, but it was close enough to twist the knife in tradition's side. Others hesitated, then followed, some kneeling fully, some only dipping their heads. Not all. A cluster to the right remained standing, faces closed, eyes flat. Future trouble, Sylvia thought distantly. Rydian, still breathing hard, turned back to the crowd. His hand slid from Sylvia's chest down to her fingers, lacing them with his in a grip that was not gentle and not possessive, something fiercer and more fragile. From this night, he said, voice rough but carrying, you will not speak of your king without speaking of your guardian. You will not threaten her without taking it as a challenge to my throat. His eyes swept the holdouts, lingering. You wanted to know who she is to me. You have your answer. Adjust yourselves accordingly. Blood had already been spilled in the skirmish outside the circle, but something deeper bled here, old oaths, old expectations, the comfortable fiction that kings stood alone. Chains snapped. Some wolves mourned the sound. Others, Sylvia saw, looked almost relieved. She squeezed Rydian's hand, grounding herself in the heat and the tremor there. Above them, the moon kept watching, silent and bright. The story had just taken a turn it hadn't in generations. Whatever came next, it would not be a repeat. Dawn broke over nightfall like a reluctant witness, painting the fortress towers in hesitant gold. The arena still smelled of sweat and tension, the packed earth scarred from where claws had gouged it deep. Bodies lingered on the tiers, some slumped in exhaustion, others whispering in tight clusters, eyes flicking toward the center where the Alpha King stood. Rydian's hand hadn't left Sylvia's since the moment his wolf had stilled under her touch. His grip was steady now, the feral glow faded from his eyes, but the air around him crackled with aftermath. The pack watched, waiting for the hammer to fall. "Orin Flintpaw," Rydian said, voice carrying clean across the stone. "You came as envoy. You leave as exile. Take your whispers and your half-truths into the wilds, cross nightfall borders again, and it will be as challenger, not guest." Orin rose from where he'd knelt in mock deference, dusting his cloak with exaggerated care. His smile was sharp, unrepentant. "Exile suits me better than thrones anyway. Just remember, King Balance cuts both ways." He inclined his head to Sylvia, a glint of something like respect in his eyes. "Guardian, may your fire burn brighter than theirs." He melted into the crowd without another word, shadows seeming to part for him. No one moved to stop him. Rydian turned to the holdouts, the cluster of nobles who hadn't knelt, their faces masks of calculated neutrality. "You heard the balance spoken. You saw it hold. Swear to the new order, or join the rogue in the wilds." One by one, they dropped to knees or fists, oaths spilling out ragged but binding. Not all were sincere. Sylvia scented the bitterness beneath some, but blood oaths didn't care about intent. They bound all the same. Thorn and Lysandra flanked them as the crowd dispersed, the beta's axe still bloodied from quiet enforcements in the shadows. "The dissenters are contained," Thorn said low. "Prisons for the worst, exile for the rest." Lysandra's gaze lingered on Sylvia, appraising. "You held," she said simply. "Most wouldn't have." Sylvia met her eyes. "Most wouldn't have had to." Rydian exhaled, the tension bleeding from his shoulders as the last wolves filed out. He turned to her, thumb brushing the back of her hand. "It's done." "No," she said softly. "It's begun." He nodded, the weight of it settling between them. She was no longer the debtor's daughter dragged in chains. She was guardian. Mate, the cornerstone of whatever nightfall became next. There was no unringing that bell. Months blurred into seasons, the full moon's echo fading into daily rhythms reshaped by their hands. Sylvia walked the halls now, not as guest or prisoner, but as architect. In the scriptorium, she bent over parchments with scribes and elders, striking lines through old laws that treated omegas as chattel. "No more pens," she insisted, voice steady. "No more forced heats or breeding tallies. Omegas train as warriors if they choose, healers if they choose, leaders." The words became ink, then oath, then precedent. In the training yards, she worked with the young ones' pups who'd never seen a guardian before. Her moonfire came easier now, controlled in bursts, shields of silver light, whips of force to teach precision. "Power isn't a curse," she told a wide-eyed girl with trembling hands. "It's a tool. Yours to wield." Her belly rounded gently under loose tunics, a secret shared only with Rydian in the quiet hours. Not a chain, but a choice. A life woven from two lines that had waited generations to cross. Rydian ruled beside her, his hand softer where it counted. Dissenters heard before blades fell, borders opened to trade instead of raid, but iron where it bent. Challengers found no mercy in his gaze, his wolf steady now, anchored. He sought her counsel in the war room, listened when she said no, built walls around the new laws with the ferocity of a mate defending his own. One evening, as frost rimed the windows and the hearth roared, Sylvia found him on the balcony, staring at the wilds where Orin had vanished. She slipped her arms around him from behind, chin resting on his shoulder. The pup kicked lazily between them. "You're brooding," she murmured. "Habit," he said, covering her hands with his, checking for cracks. "There will always be some," she said, "but we mend them together." He turned, pulling her close, forehead to hers. "3 nights," he said softly. "That was the bargain. You could have walked at dawn. Should have, by all reason." She smiled, tracing the scar over his heart. "I had 3 nights to survive and leave. But I saw the man under the king." the wolf under the monster. The kingdom waiting to be more than blood and claw. Her voice dropped. I chose to stay. Not because you owned me. Because we could build this. His breath shuddered out. And every day, I have to choose to be worthy of that. The king you risked everything for. You already are, she whispered. Keep choosing anyway. He kissed her then, slow and deep, the moon their only witness. Below, nightfall stretched out, changed, fragile, fierce. A kingdom reborn not from chains, but from a vow kept in the firelight. If this tale of forbidden bonds and unbreakable wills gripped you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. The wilds hold more secrets. Don't miss what rises next.